Hi everyone, and welcome back to Cloud Lunch and Learn. This is our fourth session, and so you want to be an Azure Solutions Architect Expert. And today, Dwayne will be focusing on security and identity. So with that, Dwayne, over to you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Welcome everybody. Again, welcome to this session on security and identity. I'm Dwayne Natwick. Those of you who have our first-time joiners, I am a senior cloud training architect, and with over 30 years of experience in IT, I have my Solution Architect Expert certification, as well as multiple other Azure and 365 roles. I'm also around cybersecurity, a CISSP certified, and I am a Microsoft certified trainer and a regional lead. Find me on the social media links on this slide, and if anybody, I will share this share my my handles at the end of the presentation as well, for anybody that wants to follow me and catch up on anything I'm doing on social media. As we've talked through a lot of the objectives the last few sessions, today we're going to get into the objective area of security and identity, but we do have multiple areas that are covered in the two exams that are the Solution Architect Expert Certification exam. Currently, the 303 and 304 exam are in beta testing, so you really have two options for taking the exam. The 300 and the 301 are the active exams right now. If you want to have your results right away, those are the ones to focus on here until around September 30th, when the 303 and 304 probably would go live. Actually, they might go live maybe later this month or in August as well, and probably have some time where both exams are in general availability. But understand, if you register and take the 303 or the 304 now, you won't get your results until after till about 2 weeks to 3 weeks after they come out of beta. So some things to understand there around the exams. The objective areas, we've been covering a lot of these objective areas through these sessions, and we've been hitting the areas for to give you a foundational aspect of what to expect and what to focus on as we go through as you go through preparing for the exam. So today we're going to hit the security and identity management topics. I'm going to talk briefly on defense and in-depth security and then we'll hit on the particular topics. And security around all of the areas within the Azure environment, I could probably spend 6 sessions on alone. So we're going to go through a lot of these topics pretty quickly, but hopefully give you just a little bit of foundational understanding that'll take you to the next step and the next level of learning as you prepare for these exams. So we'll hit Azure AD and some of the concepts around identity management and utilizing Azure Active Directory. Couple of, and then some networking areas such as virtual networks, network security groups, load balancers, traffic managers, application gateways. We'll talk briefly about Key Vault and Recovery Services Vault, Azure Policy, the Azure Monitor and Log Analytics, and then finish up talking about Security Center and Azure Sentinel. When we're talking about security, it's very important to think about the depth and breadth of what goes into our security posture and what we need to take into account, and doing a proper evaluation of what threats and what potential vulnerabilities you have that expose you to those threats. And as an organization and a architect, you need to think about what could be the internal and the external threats to the organization that you are architecting your Azure as well as your organization's security posture around. And on the slide, you can see, this is just a short list of things, but kind of first and foremost, from an internal threat standpoint, vulnerabilities due to lack of patch updates, elevated privileges, development backdoors, your perimeter threats, and architecting to those, as well as then the external threats and what you might have in terms of bad actors exploiting vulnerabilities and exploiting some of those internal threats like shadow IT or social engineering and areas of trying to inject attacks in web pages or brute force or denial of service type threats from bad actors are all important things that you need to consider when you're building your security posture. And when you are building that security posture, it's very key to think about all of the areas. And as we go through what we're talking about in terms of identity management and security, all of those components that we'll talk about today are layers of security that you can put into place. And you can see here, that defense in depth approach is you're ultimately protecting your personal and organizational data here right in the middle. And the more layers that you can build with a strong security posture to protect those, the less likely a bad actor is going to be able to access that data. If you are only using one layer of these to protect your information, it's going to be very easy for somebody to break in and hack that environment. Yet, if you take into account all of these, it's going to be very unlikely that somebody could get through all of these layers and get to your data. And so you need to take all of this, think of this and all of this in the aspect of building your security posture and architecting your environment within Azure as well as your organization. And I like to use an example of building a house and how you would architect and design and protect yourself in terms of your household. And cyber defense, you could take each area of cyber defense and kind of take it into how you're protecting yourself and your home and your family. Think of your home and your family and all of your financial information as your defense to the outside world. And when you architect and build your house, you're thinking of where my external doors are going to be. How am I going to put security cameras up? Are my internal doors going to be locked? Am I going to have a safe for sensitive documents? And all of those things can be equated to how you think about cyber defense in depth as well, where you have your building security of your fence and doors, your role-based access control being the keys to your house. Only people that have privileges to get into your house can have keys to your house. Your internal doors provide segmentation of having separate rooms and internal doors within your environment. Hardening your operating system and your host. You're putting additional locks and protections in your environment. Your APIs having additional having deadbolt locks on your doors and protecting with encryption and classification, having lock boxes and jewelry boxes that have locks on them. And then your monitoring area of having an alarm system, having security cameras, and as well as a generator within your environment. You would have all of that from a standpoint of the ability to monitor what's going on within your house and what is and keeping your house up and running. Within the cloud, and specifically because this is a Azure focused discussion, there's the shared responsibility, and as we go through each of the types of cloud services, starting with just your own private network on premise, you look at the responsibility and how much responsibility you have as an architect and an organization versus how much you have, how much the cloud provider such as Azure has within protecting that information. And when as we go up the services, you can see that you have much more responsibility as we start with infrastructure services than platform and SaaS-based services. But what we'll talk about here in the next slides is that even though you might be using an IaaS type environment and it says that you are in control of everything except for the physical within the security posture, what Microsoft has built in Azure is services that can layer on here and increase your security posture. And the only thing that you need to worry about is making sure that you turn those on. And Azure has built that defense in depth security services within their environment that can help you to have the security posture across all of these layers, whether you're doing IaaS, platform services, or software as a service. So the first thing to talk about here is Azure Active Directory, and if you're if you're working in Azure, which I believe most of the people that are joining these talks have been, Azure Active Directory is the cloud native identity management service that all of Microsoft's cloud services is the foundational service of all of their cloud services. So not just Azure, but Microsoft 365, Dynamics, all of their cloud-based services are managed from an identity standpoint with Azure Active Directory. And what this does is it provides that consistent identity source across all of those services, and the addition of being able to utilize Azure Active Directory Connect to synchronize your current identities within your organization into Azure Active Directory and give your organization both an on-prem and a cloud identity that is consistent for single username and password logging in, as well as one of the nice things that Azure Active Directory has built into there is some B2B type and B2C services for utilizing other identities as well for guest users. So if you have a website that you want to force people to log into, and it's not going to be specific to your organization, you could have them use like a LinkedIn profile or a Facebook profile to log into that source. And the key thing around this is how we then cater that identity for role-based access and making sure that users that are accessing your environment only have the roles necessary for them to access the information that they require. So those are very key components to access and access management within your environment. And as we go into a SaaS-based service such as Microsoft 365, identity is a very key factor in how you architect your identity within the identities of your users within the Azure environment is going to be key to how you continue to protect your environment and protect information from leaking out of your organization. And one of those ways within the Azure environment when subscribing to Azure Active Directory is Conditional Access. And this is available for both of the premium tiers of Azure Active Directory. There's 4 different levels of subscription levels of Azure Active Directory. There's the the free tier, there's the Office 365 tier, and then there's 2 premium tiers. And it's recommended that you at least have as an enterprise organization, a P1 level premium tier of Azure Active Directory, and you get this conditional access service as part of that. And you can force within conditional access to ultimately allow access, require multi-factor authentication, which should be turned on within your organization regardless, or block access based on certain signals. So if a username is logging in from a suspect location, or maybe a risky, what might be seen as a risky location from a Microsoft threat intelligence standpoint, or you have a device that has been compromised that somebody has reported as missing, or blocking specific applications because they're flagged as potential risky applications within your organization. Logging in from IP addresses that aren't your office building, those type of things, or logging in from a device that's behind on security patches. All of those things can be created as these signals that then have one of these actions that go in that happen before you have the ability to access what you're looking for. And as we move along here, and like I said, I could probably, I was saying earlier, I taught the Azure Administrator course this week, and we spent just about the entire day talking about Azure Active Directory and identity the first day. So understand that these sessions for 1 hour, I've got to get a broad brush of a lot of information. So we're going to move from Azure Active Directory now into the virtual network pieces of things, and that networking layer, that perimeter, and the perimeter layer of things, of the defense in depth strategy, where now we're looking at virtual networks and network security groups, and then potentially also utilizing firewalls. And some key features and functionality of the 3 are listed on this slide, where you can see, your virtual network is the foundational network. When you create any resource within Azure and architect any resource, you're architecting the virtual network around it and what the IP address range and the subnet is of those resources. And it's helpful to segment your resources and services around that. And it's very similar to if you're used to architecting a on-premise network and working with switches and creating VLANs to segment workloads and segment services within your switch environment. A VNet can be utilized very similarly, where you can create and segment application resources based on a VNet. And if those applications need to cross and connect through to other sources in other VNets, you can very easily peer those within the Azure environment, within the Azure subscription. And that gives another layer of security as well, because you can build internal virtual networks that aren't exposed to the public and have one virtual network that is utilized as that gateway virtual network, where you might have your firewall on that network, and users only that access the network only hit that network from a public standpoint, and you may not have any devices that could be accessed within that network, and you create another gate essentially for that for somebody hitting your network to get into your resources in your environment. So and then network security groups create that set of rules as well. So you create inbound and outbound rules, and very similar to access control lists, where you create those rules. And it's a free service that comes along with any virtual network and network interface that you create within the Azure environment. And you create those three rules. You have three inbound and outbound rules. One of those, and the highest level rules, is deny all. But then you build and layer the different rules on there based on what your organization needs, and create those custom rules to allow IP addresses and potential ports to have access to certain resources based on source and destination. And you can build that and architect that as you need, and to the level of security that you require at a base level. And then Azure Firewall takes that a step further, where you have a built-in high availability perimeter device that has unrestricted cloud scalability, has the ability to create additional filtering rules, has the next generation threat intelligence, where it is looking at the threat intelligence database for suspect IP addresses that might be hitting your network, and have the ability then to also use multiple public IP addresses to access that firewall and route information. And as we talk about other options then to route information and protect your information, we get into the traffic management services within the Azure environment. And there's three key services to understand as you prepare for your exam, and that's the Azure Load Balancer, the Application Gateway, and the Traffic Manager. And each of these have your different use cases for routing traffic. And you can see, your Azure Load Balancer is just really a transport layer device. The application layer runs at higher up the operating system stack, or the open source, the OSI stack. And then Traffic Manager is really a DNS resolver. I compare Traffic Manager very similarly to a CDN type network, where it's going to route information based on where you're located, and bring that through. It's strictly using DNS, and it's strictly an external type device, where Load Balancer and Application Gateway are utilized for both internal and external. So you can have a external load balancer that is being utilized for directing traffic to web servers within your environment. So that's your public facing device, and you don't need to then have public IP addresses on your virtual machines or your virtual machine scale sets. It's going to then balance that traffic and maintain and watch the health of that traffic as we go about as traffic comes in. Then you can use an internal load balancer then from those virtual machines to balance traffic to your databases. An application gateway works very similarly, but again, it works more at the web-based ports and web sockets and has the ability to work with some of the platform services like Azure App Services, where load balancer is really an infrastructure type device.
Dwayne, someone asked, what about front door?
So I'm not sure exactly what that question is around what about front door. In a way, each of these devices are kind of a front door, as well as using a firewall. Those are your front door to the public, and that's where you can protect and you can segment. I'm not sure if they're Azure front door. Okay, so Azure front door product, I believe, is Azure front door product. I've never come across that myself as a within my training for any of these exams. So it's, I'll look into that. Thanks for the link, Phil. Thanks, Yuko. It's not part of the scale of this exam. I haven't come across it on any of the objective tiers. So I'll definitely look more into the Azure Front Door service and what that is. I'm going to assume that it probably ties to a lot of the other services in terms of the load balancer and things like that as another way and another aspect of protecting your environment. Very similar from a service. Somebody might think about the Bastion host service, and that's starting to creep its way now into some of the certification content for that front door, to replace a jump box from a management level. So I'm going to, I would assume that the Azure front door will be similar to that. It will be a dedicated VNet that you enter into the Azure environment that way, similar to from a management level, the Bastion host. It's probably taking that same concept, but I haven't looked into that one deeply yet. But I certainly will do that after this class, just to understand more about that service. But it's not part of the scope of this of the objectives of this particular these exams at this time. Probably will be in the next revision.
We do have another question about how to debug for DNS resolution and whether that would be through Traffic Manager.
So debugging DNS, I'm not a DNS expert. There is some DNS services within the Azure environment that it would, your certificates, and I'll talk, actually that's a good segue to a degree within Azure Key Vault, is if you're utilizing Azure Key Vault, the services that Key Vault does provide the ability for managing your certificates. So if you have certificates on your DNS domains, you can manage your certificates within there. So Microsoft, it's utilizing Azure Key Vault, will handle all of that resolution in terms of taking your certificates and even monitoring when they renew, so that you don't get those messages that, hey, this could be a risky site. So that's a point around, from a standpoint of DNS resolution. You can use Key Vault to make sure that your certificates are valid and resolve those DNS names for your own internal sites. And then Traffic Manager does do that, does do a level of resolution or understanding of, okay, where is that source access coming from, and directs that traffic to potentially the region that you may have your web servers spread across the world. It will send it to it will take that traffic and send you to the closest server to you as well. Okay, Hugo did find that Azure Front Door is part of the 303 beta exam, so you will have to know that at a high level. My apologies for omitting that. I didn't catch that when I was creating this deck. So we could go to that briefly here if we have time at the end. And then recovery services. Azure Key Vault is, we talked about the certificates in there. We can also manage our keys within there, as well as our secrets amongst from a security standpoint. It's really Microsoft's way for segmentation of duties of vendor managed keys versus customer managed keys. If you utilize Azure Key Vault, that ultimately creates that's segmentation where you are now the you're using customer managed keys, and then unless you're company requires you to use a completely different vendor for that, then you would need to use that. But this is a way to create that customer managed key environment, but still maintain utilization of Azure services. Recovery Services Vault, I kind of lumped both of the vaults together, but that's Recovery Services Vault is a little bit different, but this is where you manage all your backups of servers, files, and databases, as well as site recovery. All fall into the Recovery Services Vault. And this is a key. We talked about this when we were talking about IaaS services a couple weeks ago. These are key to understand, especially site recovery for the 304 exam. Next, we'll go into the monitoring components of the Azure environment, and these are key. The key to having that defense in depth approach is what information are we gathering about potential threats and potential vulnerabilities within our environment. And if we aren't using these services of Azure Monitor that are within the Azure Monitor ecosystem, we don't know what's going on in our environment. And Azure Monitor, Log Analytics, and Application Insights is all a key component of that, because what these services do, and Log Analytics and Application Insights all tied really to Azure Monitor and the agent that Azure Monitor puts out there, and you can put out there on your resources, both in Azure as well as in other providers and on-prem. But this maintains and gathers all of the activity logs, the diagnostics. There's Network Watcher service that gets your traffic logs around your environment, and then you can then query those logs and create alerts and actions based on those logs that feed into different dashboards, or even provide insight around information that you need to do in terms of implementing additional controls that would be presented in Azure Security Center, or potential anomalies or threats that are coming through that would feed into a SIEM solution such as Azure Sentinel. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Azure Policy, as we try to bridge those shared responsibility gaps that we talked about at the beginning, policy helps to enforce and audit on compliance and standards of your organization, what you want to control within your environment, and what you need to protect, and how you need to protect it from a GDPR standpoint or any other regulatory standards. You can create your own custom policies, or there's built-in policies and initiatives that for different regulations that you can or best practices that you can stand up within your organization and within Azure Policy, that then can audit those resources and report back again into the Azure Policy dashboard, or even in Security Center, to monitor that you are compliant with those best practice controls, and helps you then to manage your environment and make sure that you have all the best practices in place that are needed to protect information within your environment. And I've mentioned Azure Security Center a few times, and you can see, the graphic here, I'm showing that you have your information in terms of your identity management, all of your Azure Monitor and Log Analytics components, and Azure Policy all feed into Security Center and allow you to monitor and manage from a single dashboard how well you measure up to best practices for your identity management and role-based access control rules and MFA, update management, your policies, your analytics behind all of that, and then then there's the additional layer of advanced threat protection and what threats might be out there from a in a Microsoft, from a threat database standpoint, what known threats are out there, not just threats to your own organization, but threats that are being seen worldwide, and mapping those threats and understanding where you have resources that might have an impact on those threats. And to take that a step further into Azure Sentinel, nice thing about Azure Sentinel is this cloud native SIEM solution. So you can stand up a SIEM solution within your environment if you don't already have one very quickly, and integrate with not just the Azure environment, but other services and vendors within the cloud perspective and on-prem perspective. You can monitor Microsoft 365. I see a question on multi-factor authentication is MFA. So your two-factor authentication aspect. Sorry, excuse me. Azure Sentinel works with cognitive services and artificial intelligence within the overall Azure environment to look for anomalies, look for sign-in anomalies or different anomalies within your environment, and report and create a dashboard around that. And that's all built into and fills in from the Azure Monitor logging. So again, it's very key that if you're going to utilize Azure Sentinel and Azure Security Center, that you turn on monitoring within the environment. So that monitoring and management piece of things, just similarly to if you put a security camera outside your house, yet you don't have it connected to anything, you have no way to visualize what's going on or alert you on it, it's not going to really do you any good. If it's not doing that, if it's not recording, what good does a video camera do? Because if you're not watching it 24/7, you're not going to know that. That's what Azure Monitor and Log Analytics and getting all those logs and holding all those, looking at all those logs and querying information on those logs are going to help you do. And Azure Sentinel will take that information and it can present and create incidents based on what they see might be a threat within your organization. So real quick, I'm going to show here in the last few minutes a little bit of how that works within Security Center and Azure Sentinel, just to give everybody an idea of how that how these two tools within the Azure environment can be helpful around everything we've kind of talked about before, in the defense in depth strategy and how you can do that. And as you can see here, when you go into Security Center, and you can look right away at your overall security posture here with your security score. This is my demo environment and doesn't have a whole lot of resources on there, but you can see it's in there. The key thing here is the regulatory compliance. There are certain regulatory compliances that are standard, these four, which is, this one's Azure's standard, baseline best practice security controls posture. You have the US for credit card services, PCI DSS is pretty popular. And then you have the ISO 27001 standard as an international standard on here, and then the SOC technical standard here for security. And all of these then audit based on the different areas within the criteria for within security for those standards. And you can see here, what's grayed out is I don't have any services within there, but you can look and drill down on what's red and find out where I am having issues within my environment, where I have some red or yellow from a severity standpoint, and what I might need to rectify. So if you have, especially, from building a security posture to I've got an audit coming up to make sure I maintain my 27001 certification, you can look at this and you can remediate those situations. And you can see here, I always get this particular one within my demo environment, is that I have my personal Outlook account set up as a administrator, and it's flagging me that external accounts should not have owner permissions, and I don't have multi-factor authentication on one of my accounts as well. So so it's flagging both of those, and I always get flagged on those too when in my demo account. You know, you should, and if you get flagged on those, you should remediate those right away within your production types environments. And it's very easy also to then, you can manage compliance policies right within here and create new policies right within here. I can add more standards, and you can see there's different standards in here. If I want to put the U.S. national security standard in here, I can do that very quickly and easily. And then the other thing I wanted to show is in Security Center is down here you have your threat protection. If I had any threats, it would put threats in here, and you have the ability also for threat mapping. If there were any threats detected to my environment on a national basis, it would actually map this on here, and you can scroll around, and it'll put potentially a map on the country, and while you're investigating, you could block that IP address temporarily as you're investigating what that threat is, so that it doesn't create an attack on your network. And then down here, you can see the resource health. So if it intentionally, you know, from a standpoint of how your resources are healthy, from virtual machines to container services, those are in here, you know, and it's categorized based on these areas of data and storage, and your compute environment, and then your identity and access. So you can see here, you have your subscriptions, you have your key vaults, and you can go through and take a look at how you're doing in each of these. You know, I don't have Network Watcher enabled in my environment, so it's actually flagging that as a low severity, but probably a good thing to do. You know, you can go through and see where you might have potential issues, and as you remediate many of these issues, you know, and get these low and high severities back to a good level, then your secure score is going to go up. And you can see here, I can review my recommendations to increase my secure score, and it's going to say what is going to increase my secure score and get me to a comfortable and healthy level within my environment. Now let me go to Azure Sentinel, and I don't really have anything enabled within Azure Sentinel, but let me quickly here create a workspace. So just take a second. I forget. I'm got a disallow policy. Sorry about that. Let me go to a different directory here real quick. The joys of a live demo.
While Dwayne is getting this set up, if you could all just take a moment to look at the two links that I've popped in the chat. One of them, if you fill it in, you will get materials relevant to this session from Microsoft. And it also means a lot to the Cloud Lunch and Learn team. And also, we'd love it if you could provide feedback on our sessions. So I've popped in a link there. So if you can just sort of copy them, open them out, don't do them yet until the end of the session. That would be much appreciated.
All right, So once this gets created, any other questions as well that anybody has on what we've covered here today? It's a lot of information, and a lot of coverage area as part of this, as part of these services and security and identity management. Like I said, I teach for Azure Administrator, which is very similar to the 303 exam from an objective standpoint. I spend the entire first day talking about identity management. I spend an entire day talking about virtual networks and security. So they're big components, and I could probably do, like I said, 6 sessions on each of those to get them, to get you comfortable with them. So, but it's very important to understand the security components that go around everything. That's a really good question, Maurizio. How much of 303 is in common with AZ 500? There's a lot of overlap in those. The one thing that they've done with 500, when the administrator exam was out a year and a half ago, they had 2 exams for becoming an Azure administrator. And what you find within that is that they took some of the identity and access management and role-based access control and conditional access stuff, a lot of the stuff that goes into the premium, like the P2 area of things, like privileged identity management. You don't see a whole lot of that in the solution architect or the administrator exam anymore. You see a little bit more of it really in the solution architect exam than you do in the administrator exam, because a lot of that's moved to 500. But it's good. It's a overall need. You need to know how to at a level of how they work and how to architect to them, depending on which exam you're taking. So it is important from that aspect to know a lot of the identity management pieces. One of the things that you don't focus a whole lot on the exam for solution architect is database security is a big piece of the 500 exam, but it doesn't go as granular in terms of identity and access management on the architect or the administrator exam as it used to, because of the 500 exam. But you do still, identity and access management, I kind of say this to a lot of people, is really where everything starts and ends in terms of security. Because if you give somebody the wrong role or don't understand the roles and give somebody access privileges that are above and beyond what they need to do to complete their job or to access the information that they need, you're putting your entire organization at risk from a security standpoint of exposing sensitive data. So that identity and access management piece, and understanding your different roles and responsibilities and how to architect that as a solution architect is very important. So you need to know that going in, but not to a super granular level.
So we've got another question. Within Security Center, does enabling regulatory compliance cost extra?
Not well. So enabling, to get that service and to have that service, you have to have a standard subscription. It's not part of the free tier. So you do get a level of Security Center within the Azure, when you create an Azure subscription right off the bat. And I can show that real quick. I got time. If I go back to my Security Center.
Cool. We've got one more question after that.
And so, yeah, if you go into your subscription coverage, I have standard coverage in here. If I was only partially covered, it would have that. But you can go in and edit your plan here, and here's where your pricing stands. You can actually review your pricing right within going into your subscription with Security Center. So you can see you get a lot more security features around the standard subscription, including the regulatory compliance dashboards. You don't get those with the free subscription. And you can see here that then when you have the standard subscription, you can see the different costs that go into that. So there is a cost that goes into having that level of regulatory compliance. What's the cost of security to your organization and compliance? What would you be if you get audited on a specific compliance and you fail that audit? What's that going to cost you? Is it going to cost? It probably is going to cost you more than what Security Center is going to cost you on a monthly basis.
So we've got another question. In the perspective of security, would it be best practice, to use Security Center and Sentinel, or would Sentinel be enough to manage the security? And if the Security Center and Sentinel complement each other, then what kind of security checks should be done in the Security Center and which in Sentinel?
Okay, so that's an excellent question. They complement each other. So when you set up your Sentinel environment, as now I have it up and running, you have these data connectors right here in your configuration, and you can configure all of the services right within Azure Sentinel, and Security Center is one of those connectors. And so you can connect your Security Center subscription right into Sentinel. And what Sentinel is going to do is it will then take the information that's coming into Security Center and can run queries on that that information and create incidents based on your failing your audit. You don't have multi-factor authentication in place. It will create then incidents. So this is Azure Sentinel, and the Azure Sentinel workplace is going to help you to manage and monitor what's going on in Security Center and what the recommendations are coming through Security Center. So they do complement each other, and Sentinel complements a lot of services within there as really a security it helps. It's really a first step to creating a security operation center, like creating a SOC, because it can create incidents and allow you to investigate those incidents, create workbooks out of those incidents, and respond to those incidents. You can assign if I had any users here, I can assign those to specific users within the group, within the security team, and then they can investigate and close out those incidents. So they work together. You wouldn't use one. You wouldn't use one versus the other. If you have your own incident management service or your own SIM that you're utilizing, then you might not need Sentinel. You can connect a lot of that to what's going on with Azure Monitor into that. But if you need an incident response and incident investigation type service, that's where Azure Sentinel comes into place. What Azure Security Center does is it takes what's being logged and what's being monitored and what policies you have in place, and it provides a dashboard of what your overall security posture is.
On this topic, someone said, Azure Sentinel, can it be compared to Splunk? And then I've got two more questions for you.
Yeah, it's very similar to Splunk or QRadar or any of those SIMS type services. It's just very quick and easy to get up and running at a very easy level. And if you have a majority of your services within the Azure environment, you can connect to that very quickly, as well as 365. Microsoft 365 is in here, as well as you can see Barracuda. You can connect right into AWS CloudTrail and bring AWS logs right into here as well.
Okay, cool. So we've got another question. I maybe missed this, but Azure Bastion, worth mentioning there, or still in play on Azure?
Yeah, Azure Bastion is important to understand. I did brush over it a little bit, but what Azure Bastion is creates a dedicated subnet that is used for management. So really the way to think about Azure Bastion, if you're an architect, is think about how you would architect a jump box to allow for RDP access into your virtual machines. Bastion makes that much more much more easily and secure from a standpoint of, instead of standing up a virtual machine that somebody could go in and hack, all this is a subnet that's passing through RDP for the management team to get into an environment in a secure manner, rather than having to turn on RDP ports across your virtual machines.
Cool. And then one other question: subscription premium P1 versus premium P2. What's the main difference?
Main difference would be privileged identity management. So if you have users within your environment, they may need temporary administrative privileges. You can set up time-based access to making them an administrator. And so it's a very powerful feature to provide temporary elevated privileges rather than changing somebody's role. It's a temporary role change and giving them administrative access if they need to specifically have that on a temporary basis. So that's probably the key differentiator between P1 and P2 is privileged identity management, which you need to understand that at a base level. Like I said, for these exams, it's that privileged identity management is a very major piece to the 500 exam when talking about IAM.
Cool. That's all the questions currently in the chat. So guys, I've popped a few links in the chat for you guys, so you can sign up for the 5th session, which is next Friday, focused on data and storage. We've got a link in there for a feedback form. Please do take the time to fill this in. And also we've got a link there to a quiz for this session. So Dwayne, do you want to talk a little bit about?
Yeah, so if you take that quiz, and I will then draw a name out of that quiz, and you will get 2 months free to Skill Me Up, which is my company's on-demand training service. So you'll get 60 days. You get 10 days free right off the bat, but you get 70 days access to the Skill Me Up service, which has the Azure Architect courses on there on demand, so you can go in and study to take your exams. And I've got from last week's session in the platform services, I've got Khalid Dermumi won that, and I don't know if that individual is on today, but if they're not, I will contact them via the email address that they put into the exam or the quiz when they took the quiz. So take that quiz, and you will I'll announce the winner in next week's session and contact you and get you all registered into the Skill Me Up platform to continue your preparation for this exam or these exams.
Awesome. Thanks, Dwayne. Thanks everybody for joining. We do have one more question about the difference between AZ300 and AZ303. Is there a quick answer?
Oh yeah. There's not a whole. What they did was really restructure the objectives and add some new services in there, but there's not a whole lot of difference between the two. It's just really a change in structure between them. The services themselves, the base services aren't as much. You might see a little bit more in terms of containers and Kubernetes than you did previously, because that's become such a popular service within the Azure environment, but there's not a huge difference.
Awesome. Thanks, Dwayne. Thank you so much for today. That was a brilliant session. Thanks to everyone for joining. Hope to see you all back next Friday.
Thanks, everybody.